my name is Pip. This is my review of Jonathan Van Ness's book, Over the Top. I am going to keep this pretty spoiler-free. I have talked about this book already in my reading vlog, so you might already know what my thoughts are, but I thought I'd do a review for it anyway because I think that this is a really important book that can be quite eye-opening and really also very enjoyable for a lot of different types of readers. Obviously, it's not going to be for everybody, but this book I really enjoyed. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I have to say I think the experience of this book is all about the delivery. So much of what was lovable about this book is what you love about JVN from Queer Eye, and a lot of it is really about the way he delivers what he's written. And to be honest, I think that listening to this book as an audiobook is the way to go. I'm not entirely sure that I would have enjoyed it half as much had I have actually read the book. He does a lot of abbreviations and he really writes the way he speaks. So this book really lends itself to an audiobook. And look, I love abbreviations and I love the way he uses language, but it really translates extremely well as an audiobook, and I'm not sure that it would translate as well in written format. Listening to it as an audiobook is kind of like having a really long conversation with someone who's really interesting. And the book is not quite 6 hours, so it's quite short, and it's not really written in a kind of classic biography, autobiography style, which is really interesting. Obviously, it does cover his childhood and adolescence, as all biographies do, and it kind of talks about his journey of accepting himself and the struggles he went through and the traumas he went through, and as we know, the highly publicized medical issues and drug use and all of those sorts of things. But it does it in quite a unique way, and a way that is very authentic to Jonathan Van Ness, and a way that is at times really bubbly and lighthearted, and also in a way that's extremely genuine and enjoyable. One of the things I really appreciated in this book is the discussion of trauma and the different ways that people move through trauma. Trauma is something that I find quite interesting. I think that generally it can be handled in literature in fairly stereotypical ways, and my personal experience of trauma, both like what I've had in my life, which is a decent amount of trauma, and what I have seen as a result of my occupation, is that people really handle trauma differently. They move through it differently. Some people move through it really rapidly, some people move through it really slowly, and people are triggered by different things. And also, sometimes what you see with people who've suffered trauma is that they kind of don't know how to move through it in a healthy way, and often end up reliving and re-traumatizing themselves repeatedly. And he kind of talks about how that can happen because despite there being pain in the chaos of re-traumatizing yourself, there's also some degree of comfort there. So I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say that there are some fairly dark times discussed in this book, because it's been extremely well publicized, but I'm not really going to talk about them just in case you have been living under a rock. But what I love about this book is how he can switch from the dark times to a splash of comedy or a more lighthearted story. I just think Jonathan Van Ness is straight up fabulous. I loved his Olympic obsession and his mad preparations for gymnastics and ice skating, even though he didn't really kind of participate in either sport, and his obsession with Michelle Kwan. I mean, his Instagram just makes so much more sense having read this book and kind of seen both the madness of it and the intense joy that he gets from gymnastics and ice skating, even if it's just practicing his routines in his head or in his parents' house when he was a young boy. It's a very endearing storyline and side of JVN that pops up repeatedly through this book. I loved his obsession with the Romanovs and giving people Russian names to protect their identities. That is just amazing. I mean, you do get used to it after a while, but for the first half of a book, I was just like, this is genius, and I love it. As I've already said, I love his use of language. I love that he abbreviates things. I love the way he articulates this book is really amazing on the audiobook, and I just think it just brings it to life, and it's really like having a conversation with someone who you can't help but love and adore. In terms of the way he uses language, there are so many things he says that I'm like, yes, I feel that way all the time. Like when he said, the fuckets are something that you can catch when you've just been pushed too far, where you basically just go, fuck it. And I just love that he says the fuckets are something you can catch. It's just so true. Tiny spoiler warning, you probably want to skip ahead maybe 20 seconds here. But one of the other things that I really liked in terms of it just being something different that you don't see in biographies is to give the reader a break from some of the darker stories and the darker vibe of the book. He decides to read a report he wrote on the Bill Clinton sex scandal as a young man when he was in primary school, so he was probably grade 5, grade 6. I just found that was really funny. Like, I mean, the actual segment went on for too long, like you really didn't need to read the entire report, but just the concept of the fact that he would do that to give the reader a break was pretty funny. This book is obviously not going to be for everybody, but it's a really unique autobiography, and it's told, the story of Jonathan Van Ness's life is told in a really unique way and a really generally enjoyable way. Obviously, there are times when it's not a fun story and you really get insight into what his experience was like as a gay man, learning to accept himself and processing the traumas that he has been through. And I think that if you maybe don't know a lot about the experience of being gay or some of the issues that gay men can face, that this is a really a great place to start educating yourself a little bit more, because the book has so many enjoyable moments and because it's like having a friendly conversation. Obviously, I know that the experience of being gay or growing up as a gay man is extremely different for every person, and I'm not saying at all that this book should be your reference guide into the gay experience. I'm just saying that I think it's a really great place to start for someone who's wanting to understand a little bit more. And personally, I love biographies and autobiographies that can give you a little bit more insight into the human experience, and I think that this book does that in spades. I think it's pretty clear that I enjoyed this book. I'm going to be giving it a high rating on Goodreads. I want to sit on it for a little bit longer before I decide exactly what star rating I want to give it, but it's going to be at least 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I think that if you love the Queer Eye guys, this is a must read. I think if you watch Game of Thrones, again, this is a must read. And I think if you really like autobiographies with interesting characters, with a lot of personality, that are non-standard biographies, then you'll really enjoy this book. I hope you've enjoyed my review of Jonathan Van Ness's Over the Top. Don't forget to let me know in the comments below what you thought about it if you have read it yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to check me out on social media, which is @PipCoombs for Twitter and for Instagram.